Human confronts alien girl for stealing his food, but her heartbreaking secret changes everything. The twin suns burned over Vespra Station. Heat rose from metal streets like breath from a beast. Aaron Cole, an ex-infantry engineer from Earth, finished his shift at the expansion yard. His arms ached. His back sang in dull pain. That pain felt honest. It told him he was still alive. Break. 30 minutes, the foreman shouted. Aaron took his lunch pack and walked to a quiet corner of the plaza, where a crooked statue cast a sharp slice of shade. He sat on the base, let out a slow breath, and opened his meal. Real beef on dark bread. It had cost half a day's pay to import, but he had promised himself one good thing this week. He took the first bite, eyes closed, a soft scrape, a whisper of feet. He opened his eyes. A small figure stood 3 steps away. Not human? Her skin glowed a pale teal that caught the light like water. White hair fell in rough strands around a thin face. Her eyes were wide and bright like polished cobalt. Her clothes were torn and orange with dust. They stared at each other. She moved. Fast. The sandwich was gone from his hand. She turned and ran. Hey! Aaron stood, then stopped. The plaza was full of workers, carts, drones, and shouting. She slipped between bodies and vanished. His co-worker lumbered over, 4 elbows, 1 oily smile. Problem, Cole? Just a thief, Aaron said. A hungry one. Security will sweep the alleys, the co-worker said. They'll make an example. She's a kid, Aaron said, more sharp than he meant. The co-worker raised 2 hands. Not my fight. Aaron put the empty lunch pack away. His stomach complained. The taste of beef still sat on his tongue like a memory. But the image that stayed was not the food. It was the girl's eyes, hunger, fear, pride that refused to bow. 3 days passed. The thought did not. On the 3rd evening, Aaron took a side route home. The service alleys were quiet. Recycled air hummed in the vents. Something moved behind a stack of crates. A flash of teal and white. Easy, he said. He did not shout. He stepped slow. I'm not here to hurt you. Silence. Then a tiny scrape. He rounded the crates and saw her pressed against a wall, ready to sprint. Aaron raised his hands. What's your name? He asked. She swallowed. Naira. I'm Aaron, he said. You took my sandwich. Her face fell. I'm sorry. Are you alone, Naira? She shook her head. My brother Keo, he's little. He's sick. Her voice was clear but thin, like glass held to the wind. Aaron saw the 2 sharp bones in her cheeks. The dirt ground into her knuckles. The way she kept herself between him and the dark nook behind the crates. Where are your parents? He asked. Naira's eyes filled. Gone. The fever took them last cycle. The words hit Aaron like a small hammer. Once. Twice. Simple. Final. Where do you sleep? She hesitated. Then very quiet. In the old transmitter tower. Top floor. No one goes there. Aaron nodded. Show me. She led him through back corridors and up a narrow rusted stair. The transmitter tower had long windows that looked down on the station lights. At the top, a door was blocked with scrap. Nira pushed it aside and slipped into a low attic. Inside were 2 blankets, 3 cracked cups, a tiny stack of neat treasures, a string of bottle caps, a smooth bolt, a blue shard of glass. A small shape lay under one blanket. Naira knelt. Keo, she whispered. Wake up. A boy's face peeked out. Same pale teal skin, same white hair. His eyes were darker, almost violet. His forehead was hot. He coughed, a dry, small sound. Hey, Aaron said softly. I'm Aaron. You're pink, Keo murmured. Aaron smiled. And you're teal. Good trade. Nira gave Keo water from a cracked cup. Aaron watched, jaw tight. How long has he been like this? 3 days, Naira said. I tried to buy medicine. No one will sell to Lumians. She said her species name like it was a stain. The prefect changed the rules, no papers. No care. Aaron felt anger rise, slow and cold. He had seen camps and checkpoints before. New uniforms. Same story. Listen, he said. He needs real help. We can't stay here. Naira's eyes widened. Security patrols the stairs. They scan faces. We can't be seen. Aaron looked up at the roof duct. He tested the rusted bolts with his fingers. We won't use the stairs. He pulled a panel free. Air hissed. A narrow service shaft ran toward the neighboring warehouse. Tight for him. Fine for them. Boots thudded below. Voices climbed the stairwell. A hover siren wailed outside, low and searching. Nira's breath quickened. Keo whimpered and clung to her arm. Aaron shoved his lunch pack into the shaft first. Nira, go. Take Keo, I'll close behind you. She froze. Why are you helping us? Aaron met her eyes. Because you're kids. Because you're sick. Because somebody should. It was not a speech. It was a fact. Nira held his gaze for 1 heartbeat. 2. Then she nodded, lifted Keo, and slid into the shaft. Aaron followed. Shoulders scraping metal, hands pulling, knees pushing. He heard boots at the attic door. A fist slammed the wood. A voice barked, "Open!" Aaron pulled the panel shut with his heel. Darkness wrapped them. The shaft vibrated with their breaths and the distant thrum of the station's heart. They crawled. At the far end, Aaron kicked out another panel. Night air slipped in, cool and sharp. They dragged themselves onto the warehouse roof. The suns had dropped. Vespera's lights were a net below them. Sirens rose on the street. Aaron pointed to a lower roof and then to a narrow window with a dim green light. "Maintenance office," he whispered. "I have access." Nira adjusted her grip on Keo and nodded. They ran the roofs like shadows. The sirens moved to the tower they had left. Aaron punched his code into the window lock. It clicked. They slipped inside a small office that smelled of dust and oil. Aaron slid the window closed and pulled the blinds. For a moment, no one spoke. Nira set Keo on a pile of folded tarps. She brushed the hair from his eyes. He smiled weakly at Aaron. "We're safe?" "For now," Aaron said. He looked at Nira. "Tomorrow we get the medicine." Her eyes flicked to the door. "The central clinic is guarded." Aaron checked the room's old terminal. The screen blinked a maintenance map to life, corridors, tunnels, service lifts. He traced a path with his finger. "So we won't use the front door," he said. Outside, the sirens grew louder. Inside, Keo's breath rattled like paper. Aaron's jaw set. He was already moving to the next problem. He had no sandwich now. He had a mission. The night stretched cold and metallic over Vespera Station. In the small maintenance office, the only sound was the hum of the air vents and the shallow breathing of a sick child. Aaron hadn't slept. His eyes kept drifting to the boy on the tarps, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Each time it hitched, Aaron's gut clenched. Keo's fever had climbed higher. Beads of moisture glimmered on his forehead. But his small hands were ice cold. Nira knelt beside him, whispering a lullaby in her language. Soft, fluid, almost like singing water. The song didn't hide the tremor in her voice. "He's getting worse," Aaron said quietly. "I know." Nira looked up, her wide cobalt eyes dull with exhaustion. "It's the Saru fever. When it reaches the second stage." She stopped herself, unable to finish. "What happens?" Aaron asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Their organs begin to fail. My parents lasted 2 days after that." Aaron felt the words hit like a punch. There has to be a cure. There is. But only the central clinic has it. He turned to the cracked display screen beside the workbench. The holographic map of Vespera shimmered faintly in green and blue. The central clinic was a white hexagon in the middle of the city grid, surrounded by red markers. "Guarded?" he asked. 3 checkpoints, drones, scanners that can detect Lumian DNA. "So a death trap," Aaron muttered. Nira didn't respond. She was watching her brother again, brushing sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. There was something in her movement that broke Aaron's chest open. A fierce tenderness, raw and unguarded. He stared at the map again, thinking. Every problem had a path. You just had to look at it from another angle. "The old service tunnels," he said slowly. "I worked the expansion project. Those tunnels still connect to the medical sector." Nira blinked. "They're sealed." "Officially," he said, and allowed himself a small smile. "But I know which locks they forgot to update." She studied him for a long moment. "Why would you risk this for us?" He shrugged. "Because if we don't, that kid doesn't wake up tomorrow." For the first time, she didn't look afraid of him. She just looked grateful. At dawn, they moved. Aaron borrowed a utility crawler from the construction yard, a squat, rumbling vehicle meant for hauling scrap. He tossed a blanket over Nira and Keo in the back compartment, careful to keep them hidden from the patrol scanners. As they rolled through the half-empty streets, automated announcements echoed between the metal towers. "Curfew remains in effect. Unauthorized citizens will be detained." Aaron gripped the controls tighter. His old marine instincts returned, the same cold focus that once guided him through war zones. Every intersection, every shadowed alley was a calculation. They reached the western edge of the medical district, where a forgotten access hatch waited behind a wall of rusted pipes. Aaron parked the crawler in an abandoned loading bay. "This is it," he said, prying the panel open with a crowbar. The tunnel yawned beneath, black and humming with the deep, slow pulse of the city's power grid. Nira looked down. "You're sure this leads inside?" "Positive." She hesitated, clutching Keo to her chest. "He's burning again." Aaron touched the boy's cheek. The heat was shocking. His breathing came in shallow bursts. "We'll get him the cure," Aaron said, more to himself than to her. They climbed into the tunnel. The darkness swallowed them. Only the faint blue glow from Nira's skin lit the narrow path. The walls dripped condensation and the air smelled like metal and ozone. "How long were you alone before I found you?" Aaron asked, voice low. Nira's footsteps echoed softly. 43 days, he blinked. "You counted?" "I counted everything, days, meals, hope." Her tone was steady, but it carried the quiet weight of survival. They crawled over old conduits and broken panels until they reached a vertical shaft sealed by a security plate. Aaron pulled a tool from his belt, a compact hacking spike he'd borrowed from the yard. Sparks hissed as he forced the panel open. A faint alarm chirped somewhere in the distance. "Keep moving," he whispered. They climbed into the next section, a storage chamber filled with crates marked medical waste, handle with care. Nira froze. "Someone's coming." Footsteps echoed down the hall. Aaron grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a crate. A guard in gray armor entered, tapping on a data pad. His steps were slow, methodical. Keo whimpered softly in Nira's arms. Aaron's pulse spiked. He clamped a hand gently over the boy's mouth, praying he'd stay quiet. The guard paused, frowning. Then his comm crackled. "Unit 12, report to Checkpoint 2. The guard sighed and turned away. The door hissed shut behind him. Aaron exhaled. "We keep going." They moved fast, slipping through maintenance corridors until they reached a reinforced door labeled Pharmaceutical Storage. Authorized personnel only. Nira pressed a hand against it. "This is where they keep it, which means it's locked tight." Aaron studied the biometric scanner beside the door. He smiled. "Lucky for us, I've still got my engineering clearance." He placed his hand on the pad. The scanner flickered, hesitated, then turned green. "Old systems," Aaron muttered. "Never updated the clearance database." Inside, the room was lined with glass shelves and glowing vials. Nira's breath caught. "That one," she said, pointing. "The silver capsule, Ceruin inhibitor." Aaron grabbed it carefully and tucked it into his vest. The moment felt like victory. Brief, fragile, and real. Then a voice echoed through the hall. "Unauthorized access detected. Security response initiated." Aaron looked at Nira. "Run." They sprinted down the corridor as alarms blared. Red lights pulsed overhead, painting everything in frantic color. The door behind them burst open with shouts and gunmetal boots. Aaron turned a corner, found an open chute, and pushed Nira inside with Keo in her arms. "Go. What about you?" "I'll buy us time." He slammed the chute cover shut just as the guards rounded the corner. Energy bolts scorched the walls near his head. He dove behind a console, returned fire with a maintenance pistol, and grinned grimly. So much for a quiet job. When the smoke cleared, Aaron limped to the chute hatch, blood on his sleeve but a wild light in his eyes. He slid down after them into the dark. Below, Nira was waiting, holding Keo close. She looked up at him, tears shining in the glow of the emergency lights. "You came back," she whispered. "Of course I did," he said, trying to catch his breath. Humans have a bad habit of finishing what they start. Somewhere above them, the alarms kept screaming, and deep in Aaron's chest, something new had begun to burn, stronger than fear, heavier than duty. It was purpose. The tunnel emptied into a storm drain beneath the sleeping city. Dim light spilled through grates above, cutting silver bars across the water. Aaron lifted Keo from Nira's arms and carried him through the shallow stream. The boy felt weightless, too light for a child who should have been playing, not fighting for his life. Nira limped behind, her breath ragged. They had run for nearly an hour since the alarms. No pursuit yet, but that wouldn't last. Aaron finally stopped beneath a collapsed section of pipe. He laid Keo down, checked the boy's pulse, then looked up. "He's still burning up," he said. Nira knelt beside her brother. Her eyes shimmered faintly in the half-light. The medicine won't last long if we don't stabilize him. Aaron reached into his vest and pulled out the silver capsule. You said this was the cure. It needs to be mixed with a mineral, azurite, she said. Otherwise, his body won't absorb it. Where do we get that? Nira looked away. From the upper district. The refinery towers, Aaron frowned. That's corporate zone. Restricted even to staff. I know, she said softly. But without it, he won't survive the night. He stared at her, exhausted, filthy, but unbroken. She didn't plead. She simply told the truth. Then we get the azurite, Aaron said, standing. You'll never make it in alone. They'll scan your ID. He gave a tired grin. Then I'll just borrow someone else's. Hours later, the storm drain opened behind a maintenance yard filled with idle loaders. Aaron climbed out, scanning the empty street. The city above was hushed beneath curfew. Blue, holographic patrols drifted through intersections, their lights cutting through the fog like ghost lanterns. He turned to Nira. Stay hidden here. Keep Keo warm. I'll bring back what we need, Aaron. She hesitated. You've already risked too much. They'll kill you if you're caught. He met her eyes. If I don't come back, keep heading west. There's a transport hub beyond the old docks. Someone there owes me a favor. Who? An old medic named Sira. Nira's voice softened. A human? He shook his head. No, a Threxian. And she's got more heart than most humans I've met. Before she could argue, he was gone. A dark silhouette vanishing into the glowing streets. The refinery towers loomed like metal giants. Each one pulsed with pale light from the azurite extractors deep inside. Aaron moved along the shadows, scanning the guards' movements. Old instincts kicked in. Measure the distance, count the steps. Time the turn. He spotted a lone worker smoking near the loading gate. Perfect. Aaron approached silently, using the hum of the extractor vents to mask his steps. A swift strike, a chokehold. The man slumped before he could make a sound. Aaron dragged him behind a crate and swapped ID tags. The badge clicked green at the scanner. The gate slid open. Inside, the refinery glowed like a living thing. Blue veins of raw azurite ran through pipes that hissed with vapor. The hum of machinery filled the air like a heartbeat. He found the storage wing and pulled open a container. Rows of crystalline vials shimmered like frozen lightning. He grabbed two and slipped them into his pack. That's when the voice came from behind him. Stop right. There. Aaron turned slowly. A woman stood. In the doorway, one tall, with silver-gray skin and sharp eyes that caught the light like blades. She wore a refinery coat, but her bearing was military. Who are you? She demanded. Maintenance, Aaron said calmly. Supervisor asked me to. Don't lie, she cut him off. I saw the alerts. You were at the medical complex, he cursed inwardly. So much for blending in. She stepped closer, scanning him. You're human. Why risk your life for a Lumian child? Aaron met her gaze evenly. Because no one else would. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Surprise? Sympathy? Then she exhaled. I should report you, but... She glanced at the vials. That cure, it's been withheld from every Lumian on this station. They're calling it policy. Policy, Aaron spat. That's genocide with a prettier name. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. You have spirit, human. Take the azurite and go. He hesitated. Why help me? Because I buried my brother last week, she said quietly. Same fever, Aaron nodded once. Thank you. As he turned to leave, she added, There's a freight elevator on the east side. It'll get you out unseen. Tell your Lumian girl to keep her head down. The purge starts tomorrow. The words hit like ice. The what? Population sweep. Anyone undocumented will vanish, Aaron's jaw tightened. Not if I can help it. He left before she could answer. By the time he returned to the tunnels, the artificial sunrise was painting the sky pink and gold. Nira was waiting in the shadows, Keo limp in her arms. Did you get it? She whispered. Aaron pulled the vials from his vest, breathless but smiling. 2 bottles of the good stuff. Nira's eyes shone. You did it. He mixed the medicine under her direction. A drop of silver serum dissolved into the azurite solution until it shimmered like molten stars. Gently, she tilted the liquid to Keo's lips. For a moment, nothing. Then the boy's breathing steadied. The fever flush faded to a soft glow. Nira's tears fell silently, splashing on Aaron's sleeve. He's going to live, Aaron smiled faintly. Told you I'd bring it back. She looked up at him then, really looked, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes beyond fear. Trust, maybe even hope. Thank you, she whispered. Outside, faint sirens began to wail again, distant but drawing closer. The purge was beginning. Aaron looked toward the sound and muttered, "Then it's time we stopped running." He checked his sidearm, adjusted his jacket, and stood. Naira rose beside him. "You can't fight them all. Watch me," he said. For the first time since she'd met him, Naira smiled through her exhaustion. "Humans," she murmured, shaking her head. "You're all madness," Aaron grinned. "No, just stubborn enough to make madness work." The sirens howled louder, echoing through the metallic veins of the city. And in that moment, the hunted became the hunter. The sun rose lazily over Vespera Station, its light painting the sprawling cityscape with a dull orange glow. But to Aaron, the day was already deep in shadow. The siren still screamed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. The purge had begun. Aaron and Nira moved quickly, slipping through abandoned alleys and back corridors. Every sound seemed amplified now. The shuffle of their boots on wet pavement, the distant hum of the security drones, the faint chatter of military units sweeping the lower districts. "Where are we going?" Naira asked, her voice strained from exhaustion. "Out of here," Aaron said, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We need to find a safe house before they sweep this sector." "You can't hide forever," she said. "They'll find us." "We just need to buy time," Aaron replied, his jaw set. "I'm not leaving this place without getting Kyo to safety." Naira's gaze softened, but there was an unspoken understanding between them now. She knew what he meant. The fight wasn't just for survival anymore. It was about defiance. They crossed into the industrial district, moving along a network of service tunnels that Aaron had once used for maintenance work. The tunnels were dark, lined with pipes that creaked and groaned in the stillness, their echoes carrying the weight of forgotten years. Aaron led Naira to an old maintenance shaft, its rusted door hidden behind a stack of discarded crates. He pried it open with ease, revealing a cramped space that descended deep into the heart of the station. "Where does this lead?" Naira asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Out of the city," Aaron said, grabbing her hand and pulling her forward. "It's a forgotten route. The last time they checked it was years ago. It'll get us to the Undercity. From there we can reach the docks." The air grew colder as they descended, the sound of dripping water filling the silence. The Undercity was a labyrinth of forgotten tunnels, abandoned warehouses and broken machinery. A place where the poorest and most desperate citizens of Vespera lived, hidden from the city's watchful eyes. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the damp darkness. Nira's breath came in soft, quick bursts as she struggled to keep up, but Aaron didn't slow his pace. The fear of being caught was gnawing at the back of his mind, but he pushed it down. He had a mission. "This is insane," Naira muttered after a few minutes. "We're going right into the heart of the city's underbelly." "You're talking about walking straight into the lion's den." Aaron didn't respond. He couldn't afford to doubt now. Every step, every breath was a fight for survival. For Kyo. For them all. After what felt like hours of winding through the endless tunnels, they reached a rusted metal door. Aaron hesitated for a moment before opening it. Beyond the door was a small, dimly lit room. A few crates and overturned barrels littered the space, but the real surprise was the figure standing in the corner. A tall, broad-shouldered woman with pale, translucent skin. Her eyes were sharp, silver, like the moon's reflection on a frozen lake. She wore a weathered coat and a faint scar ran across her cheek, giving her an air of quiet authority. "Aaron," she said, her voice low and steady. "You're a day late." "Sorry, Sira," Aaron said, pulling Nira behind him. "Had to dodge some security. We're on borrowed time." Sira didn't seem fazed by his entrance. She simply raised an eyebrow at the Lumian girl standing beside him. "And this is?" she asked, her gaze shifting to Nira. "Naira," Aaron said. "She's with me." "Lumians," Sira said with a nod. "I've heard the stories. You're lucky I don't follow the news much. It keeps my conscience clean." "Look, we're just passing through," Aaron said quickly. "We need transport. They're coming for us." Sira studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed and nodded toward the far wall. "Get in line," she said. "We'll get you out. But it's going to cost you." Aaron stepped forward, searching her face. What's the price? Nothing you can't pay, she said with a small smile. But don't expect a free ride. The last time I helped someone like you, I ended up with a target on my back. So if you're looking for a hero, look elsewhere. Aaron didn't flinch. He knew the price of doing the right thing in a place like Vespera. We'll figure it out, he said, his voice firm. Sira led them through a maze of back corridors and hidden rooms. The deeper they went, the more the station felt like a living thing. A vast, sentient beast built from metal, sweat, and fear. They reached a hidden chamber in the back of an abandoned freight bay. A small shuttle sat in the center, surrounded by crates and equipment. The ship looked old, its hull worn and scratched from years of use. It's not much, Sira said, but it'll get you out of here. Aaron nodded. Where does it go? Anywhere but here, Sira replied. The farther you get, the better. Nira stepped forward, her eyes wide. And Keo? What about him? Sira looked at the boy, still pale but breathing easier now. I'll see to him. I've got supplies. He'll be all right. Aaron's gaze flicked from Sira to the shuttle, then back to Nira. We'll be out in no time. I promise. As they boarded the shuttle, Aaron felt a weight lift off his shoulders. But it was only temporary. The real fight was still to come. The engines hummed to life as the hatch sealed behind them. Aaron sat in the pilot's seat, setting coordinates for the edge of the station. Nira sat next to Keo, her eyes locked on the boy's face, watching for any sign of change. Where do we go from here? Nira asked, her voice soft. Anywhere we can, Aaron said, his fingers flying over the control panel. Anywhere but here. And with that, the shuttle lifted off, its engines roaring as they broke through the atmosphere of Vespera, leaving behind the city that had been both their prison and their battleground. But the galaxy was a big place, and Aaron knew that Vespera was just one chapter in a much larger story. The journey was far from over. The hunt was still on. The shuttle glided through the cold vacuum of space, leaving the bright, fractured edges of Vespera Station behind. The hum of the engines was a constant companion, a subtle reminder of the distance between them and the dangers they had just escaped. Aaron sat at the controls, his fingers tense against the flight stick. The stars stretched out before him like a dark ocean, infinite and unfeeling. For the first time in days, he felt a faint trickle of relief. They were no longer on the run. They had a chance. Behind him, Nira whispered to Keo, her voice barely a tremor in the silence. The boy was still weak, but the medicine had begun to take effect. He slept fitfully in her arms, the fever finally breaking, though it was clear that the road ahead would still be difficult. Aaron glanced back at her, his expression softening. Nira had been his silent partner throughout this, following, trusting even when she had no reason to. And now she was in his debt, though he didn't want it. This wasn't about repayment. It was about survival. The shuttle's artificial gravity kicked in, and the faint hum of the engines quieted, replaced by the stillness of deep space. Aaron turned to Sira, who had taken the co-pilot seat, her eyes flicking between the control panel and the stars beyond. How far are we from the border? He asked. 3 hours, she said without looking at him. That's where the sector police patrol stops. From there we're free. Free, he muttered. The word felt hollow in his mouth. They had been running for so long, just trying to stay ahead of the law, just trying to survive. Was freedom really this simple? Sira's voice broke into his thoughts. You've got a lot of enemies, you know. Being human isn't exactly a mark of respect around here. Aaron met her eyes, but she wasn't looking at him. She was staring out the viewport, watching as the darkness of space stretched infinitely. I know, he said quietly, but I'm not running anymore. For a moment, there was only the hum of the engines and the slow pulse of the stars around them. Then Sira turned to him, her face unreadable. I've seen what happens when you get caught up in this, she said. The government's got agents everywhere. They'll want to make an example of you. Don't think you're out of the woods just because you're in a ship. Aaron felt his blood cool. He knew she was right. There was no escaping the consequences of his actions. No one was truly free. Where are we going after the border? Nira's voice came from the back, softer now but still laced with uncertainty. Sira turned in her seat, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I've got some friends on the outer rim. They'll help you get to a safe house. From there you can figure out your next move. Aaron nodded, but his mind wasn't on the destination. It was on the consequences of what had just happened. They had escaped. They had survived, but the price of that survival wasn't just the medicine, the ship, or the stolen hours they had stolen from their pursuers. The price was everything that came next. He had no illusions. The Galactic Council wasn't interested in a small-time smuggler and his ragtag group of fugitives. They were interested in control, and that meant they would stop at nothing to track down Nira, Kyo, and everyone else like them. The laws of the station were already being rewritten, a purging of entire populations, and the eradication of anything that didn't fit their perfect narrative. The thought sat heavy on him, gnawing at his resolve. Was he really ready to be their resistance? To take this fight beyond survival and into the heart of the galaxy? Aaron? Nira's voice broke through his thoughts again. What happens if they catch us? He met her eyes, finding her gaze steady. Even with the weight of everything they'd just escaped, she had her own scars, and now she wore them on her face, on her soul. We fight, he said simply. We survive. That's all we can do now. She nodded, holding Kyo tighter. But there was something else in her eyes now. Something he hadn't seen before. Not fear, not desperation, hope. As the shuttle sailed onward past the edge of the sector, Aaron thought about what it would mean to take this fight to the heart of the Empire. The world wasn't going to change just because they wanted it to. It never did. The fight was going to be ugly. It was going to hurt. It was going to ask for everything from them. But he couldn't turn back now. Hours passed in tense silence. The hum of the engines faded as they approached the border. Aaron kept his hands tight on the controls, his mind still racing through every possible outcome. He was preparing for the worst just in case, and then the alarm went off. Beep. Beep. Sierra's eyes went wide. Shit, they've found us. Too soon, Aaron said, slamming his fist against the console. The radar blipped. A patrol ship was closing in fast. We won't outrun it, Sierra said. Get ready. Aaron's heart pounded. The border was so close, but the patrol was faster, more efficient. The shuttle was old, too slow. There was no way they could escape this one, unless they did the unthinkable. Cut the engines, Aaron said. What? Sierra's voice cracked with disbelief. Are you insane? We'll get caught immediately. We don't run. We don't fight. We disappear. He pulled hard on the throttle, cutting the engines. The shuttle lurched and they coasted into the shadows of a nearby asteroid field. Hold tight, Aaron said, his grip tightening on the controls. This is going to get bumpy. The patrol ship closed in, scanning the empty space. For a moment, Aaron held his breath. The stars outside blurred as they veered sharply, threading the shuttle between asteroids. Let's hope they don't see us, he muttered. The patrol ship passed. Aaron's pulse thundered in his ears. The scanner never picked them up. They were invisible, for now. Sierra exhaled sharply. That was crazy. You're insane. Aaron didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had gotten them out. But the real war was only beginning. The shuttle coasted through the asteroid field, moving between jagged rocks and drifting debris. The dim stars beyond seemed so far away, as if the whole galaxy was closing in on them. Aaron's hands were steady on the controls, but his mind raced ahead, calculating their next move. They had bought time. For now, they were safe. But for how long? The scanners still hadn't picked up their shuttle, and the patrol ship was now miles behind. The vastness of space around them felt oppressive. The quiet, the emptiness. Every choice now felt like a gamble. Sierra's voice broke through the tension. You're good at this, she said, her tone dry. But don't get cocky. The closer we get to the outer rim, the more of a target we become. They'll put out a bounty on you. Aaron didn't respond immediately. The weight of her words pressed down on him. His plan had always been to escape Vespera, to put as much distance between them and the station as possible. But now, every ship that passed them would be a potential threat. Every customs checkpoint a new danger. I know the risks, he finally said, glancing over his shoulder at Nira and Kyo. She was still holding him close, her face pale but calm. Kyo had stabilized, though his body was still weak from the fever. Aaron knew that the boys' survival was only temporary unless they found a real medical facility. We need to get to the outpost at Meridian Station, Sierra said, her eyes narrowing as she studied the fading patrol ship on their radar. It's small, hidden. We'll blend in, but only if we don't make a scene. I'll follow your lead, Aaron said, eyes scanning the field ahead. The space between them and the patrol ship was enough for now, but that could change in an instant. Sierra settled into her seat, keeping one hand on the ship's controls while the other gripped a worn data pad. She punched in a set of coordinates, her fingers moving quickly. Meridian's just a jump away, but we'll need to clear the sector. The customs patrols will be there by tomorrow. If we can make it through the warp gate without attracting attention, we'll be in the clear. How do you know so much about all this? Aaron asked. You seem to have a lot of connections. Sierra glanced at him, her lips curling into something that almost resembled a smile. I'm a smuggler too, just more careful about who I work with. She paused, her gaze hardening. I've done things I'm not proud of, but the people we're dealing with, and they're worse, and that's what I'm fighting for now. Aaron nodded. He didn't need to ask more. He could see it in her face. They were all fighting something, and it was bigger than the fight for survival. It was the fight to be human in a galaxy that didn't care if you lived or died. Hours later, the shuttle's engines hummed quietly in the cold of space. Aaron kept the course steady, guiding them toward the Meridian warp gate. The stars outside stretched in bright ribbons of light, pulling the ship toward the next phase of their journey. But the silence between them was growing heavier. Naira was still holding Keo, her eyes flicking to the viewports as the distant stars passed by. She hadn't spoken much since the asteroid field. The tension in the air wasn't just about the hunt, but about what they would do next. What happens after Meridian? Naira finally asked, her voice uncertain. Aaron turned slightly in his seat, his eyes meeting hers. After that, we find the resistance. We get them the proof we have when we start taking the fight to the people who are causing this. The governor's policies in Vespera are only the beginning. Sierra's voice cut through, her tone sharp. You're assuming the resistance will want to help. They're a disorganized bunch and they've got their own problems. Not all of them will care about some sick kid and a smuggler. Aaron turned to her, his jaw tight. Then we'll make them care. The words hung in the air, more defiance than strategy. He knew the risks, but after everything, there was no going back. Why fight for people who aren't your own? Naira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What does it matter to you? Aaron paused, considering the question. It wasn't the first time he had asked himself the same thing. What was the cost of loyalty when you didn't have anything to lose? I've seen enough of the world to know that it's not about who you're born to, he said slowly. It's about what you do with the life you've got. I've got nothing left but this fight, and maybe that's enough for me. Naira was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on the stars outside. The words lingered between them, quiet but heavy. We've been living in a galaxy that doesn't care about us, Aaron continued. It's time we change that. The ship's systems began to hum as they neared the warp gate. The shimmering gate opened before them, a massive energy field rippling in the blackness. Beyond it lay Meridian Station, a small outpost, isolated but strategic. A place where people like them could disappear, but also where they could find something worth fighting for. Get ready, Sierra said, her fingers flying over the console. This is where things get real. Aaron checked his weapons, the familiar weight of his sidearm and knife reassuring him, though he knew it wouldn't be enough if things went wrong. They would need more than luck to get through this. As they passed through the warp gate, the ship was rocked by the violent shift in space-time. The stars streaked into a blur, and for a few moments the universe seemed to bend and twist around them. Then, as the distortion settled, the station loomed ahead, a dark metallic structure floating in the vastness of space, barely visible against the backdrop of the starfield. Sierra punched in their docking codes. The ship hummed as it slid into the station's docking bay. The door opened and the silence of the station pressed in on them. They were here, but the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. As Aaron stepped out of the shuttle, his heart pounded. This was their chance to regroup, to plan, to fight. And somewhere, in the depths of the galaxy, The people who had made the laws would soon learn that not all of humanity would bend to their will. This was just the beginning. The docked shuttle groaned under the weight of silence. The dim, flickering lights of Meridian Station cast long shadows across the steel floors, as though the station itself was holding its breath. Aaron's boots clanked against the cold metal as he stepped into the quiet terminal. Naira and Keo followed, her eyes darting around in constant vigilance. Meridian Station was as small as it was quiet. To an outsider, it might seem like just another forgotten outpost, a simple stop for those traveling through the galaxy. But to those who knew its secrets, it was a fortress of resistance. The air was thick with the smell of machinery and the faint hum of old generators. This place had survived through sheer grit, outlasting many like it in the galaxy. You said, "This place is a safe house," Naira whispered, glancing over her shoulder at Aaron. "It's more than that," Aaron replied. He adjusted his jacket, fingers brushing the concealed blaster at his side. "It's where people who want to fight back find shelter, where the lost find a purpose." Sira stepped up beside him, her boots scuffing the floor as she led the way. "It's a long way from what you think," she said, casting a sideways glance at Aaron. "Don't get too comfortable. The people here aren't easily impressed. They've seen it all." "Yeah, and we've survived it all," Aaron said, his tone steady but focused. They reached the central hub of the station, a low-ceilinged room cluttered with old tech and resistance fighters discussing plans in low voices. Aaron's eyes scanned the room. Men and women in various forms of worn-out armor, some patched, with makeshift material, others marked by scars of their battles. The place was a living, breathing reminder that the fight for survival was constant, and not everyone had the luxury of escaping the battles they'd been born into. "Who are they?" Naira asked softly, her voice edged with curiosity. "People like you and me," Aaron said, his gaze steady on the faces in the room. "People who refuse to be crushed by the system. They may not wear fancy uniforms or sit in cushy offices, but they fight, and sometimes that's enough." They passed through the room toward the back where a few figures were gathered around a table, spread with maps and data pads. One of them, a tall man with short-cropped hair and a face etched with age, looked up as they approached. "Aaron," the man said, his voice like gravel. "You're a lot bolder than I gave you credit for." Aaron gave a curt nod. "What can I say? I'm good at making things happen." He glanced at Naira and Keo. "And these two are part of the package." The man, whose name was Jalen, didn't seem impressed. He just looked at Naira, then at Keo, and his gaze softened. "Got caught in the crossfire, huh?" "Something like that," Aaron replied. Jalen sighed. "You'll be lucky if they don't track you here. The authorities will want to make an example of you. They'll come for everyone." "You've heard of the purge, then?" Naira asked, her voice tinged with the quiet anger that had built up over the last few days. Jalen nodded, his expression hardening. "Of course. The authorities are wiping out anyone they can find who doesn't fit their perfect little world. And they're not going to stop until they've eradicated every last one of you." Aaron stepped forward. "That's why we need to act. We can't just wait for them to show up at our door. We have to hit them back. We have to show them that we won't just hide anymore." Jalen studied him for a moment, the lines around his eyes deepening as he considered the weight of Aaron's words. Then he nodded. "All right. You've got my attention, but it's not going to be easy." Aaron felt a flicker of something, hope maybe. For the first time in days, he didn't feel like he was fighting alone. "What's the plan?" Aaron asked, leaning over the table. Jalen tapped a data pad and a hologram flickered to life. A map of the galaxy with key locations marked in red. "We've been monitoring the movements of the Kaldorian regime," Jalen began. "They've been consolidating power, putting pressure on the outlying sectors. The medical facilities, the trade routes, everything is under their control now. But there's one weak point, their supply lines. That's where we hit them." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about sabotage." "Exactly," Jalen said. "We disrupt their resources, hit their infrastructure where it hurts. No one can stop us if they can't even keep their supply lines intact. We create chaos, force their hand." Sira, who had been listening in silence, spoke up. "And you think the resistance here can handle it?" "We've got the manpower," Jalen replied. "But we'll need help. It's not just about striking once. It's about hitting them where they don't expect it, and then making sure they don't recover. We need to infiltrate their ranks. Aaron leaned back, considering the implications. You're not asking for a simple strike. You're asking for a full-on war. Jalen's gaze hardened. It's not a war until they make it one. The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. Aaron, Naira, and Keo stayed in the station's hidden quarters while Sierra worked to recruit more fighters from the outlying sectors. Jalen's resistance group was small but dedicated, and they had resources in places Aaron had never dreamed of. They gathered information from old contacts, hacked into Caldorian security systems, and started setting up the first wave of attacks. It was a risk, but it was their only chance. On the fourth day, the signal came through. The operation was set. We'll hit them at the supply depot just outside the city, Jalen said, pointing to a location on the map. If we do this right, we'll stop their shipments for at least a week. Aaron nodded. We can do that. Let's move. Naira looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. Are you sure about this? We're fighting an empire, not just some small group of mercenaries. Aaron looked back at her, his face resolute. We're fighting for every Lumian who's ever been forgotten. We're fighting for freedom. The night of the operation, the resistance gathered in the shadows, preparing for their strike. The air was thick with anticipation, but there was no fear. Aaron could feel it. The charge of something bigger than survival, something that would make their story one worth telling. They slipped through the shadows, moving as one unit toward the supply depot. The Caldorian guards were distracted and the path was clear. They breached the facility's perimeter, setting explosives and hacking into the security systems. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the enemy's operation. Aaron could hear the distant hum of machinery, the clicking of weapons being loaded. This was it. The countdown was on. As the final seconds ticked down, Aaron thought of everything they had lost and everything they had yet to gain. The future wasn't certain, but it was theirs to shape, and for the first time in a long while, Aaron felt like they had a real chance. The explosion shook the night sky, lighting up the darkness like a beacon. The fight had begun, but this time they wouldn't be running anymore.